Would you like to take a train with me today? My grandfather said, "Why are you so upset, my little cutie?" and suggested that we go to the rail station with him the next day. I went to the station a few times before, but I just went back and forth from the hall and never went into Grandpa's office. I learned that throwing a tantrum can sometimes lead to good things. I wore a towel around my neck early in the morning, and my grandfather washed my face, and I brushed my teeth by dabbing salt on Grandpa's big thumb. Since then, I brushed my teeth by dabbing salt on Grandpa's big thumb every morning and night. Thanks to that big thumb, big salt brushing, I never had a cavity in my life and never went to the dentist even once. I was wearing a deep purple velvet one-piece dress, and my hair was braided into pigtails. Of course, it was my grandfather who did it. Grandpa raised my mother alone, so he said that braiding my hair into pigtails was a piece of cake. The cover of the book was made of velvet, like my one-piece dress. The title was Andersen's Fairy Tales. I could already read Andersen's fairy tales with no much difficulty, and that was all thanks to my grandfather. I was able to read and write Korean when I was 5 or 6 years old before I went to school. My grandfather stops by the market on his way home after work. He buys fresh fish like mackerel and celery. My grandfather always grills fish on a hot brazier and places the freshly grilled fish on the table that my grandmother prepared in advance. When I eat the fish bones on the table and put only the white meat of the mackerel on my spoon, I hear my grandfather's Yoshi Yoshi. As the night deepened, the grandmother and grandfather read a book called Cheon-soo Kyung. And Grandma reads along after Grandpa reads a line. I listened to the Heavenly Sutra read by my grandmother and grandfather in my comforter. So that spring comes after the winter. When my grandfather read it, my grandmother and I followed him. My grandfather said that the Cheon-soo Gyeong was a magic spell that would grant wishes. In the comic book, the monkeys would pull out a few strands of hair, put them on their hands, and shout, "Suri Suri Maha Suri Suri Sabaha tilde Ya." As Sun Wukong shouted, the hair transformed into hundreds of brave monkeys, who powerfully took the lead. Ah, when I played alone and without realizing it, I sang Cheon Soo Kyung like a song to the first and second bars. My grandmother loved it when I sang the Cheon Shugyong. When she was picking beans or sewing, she would say to me, Onagai. It was a request to me to sing the Cheon Shugyong and play with her. Sometimes, I would open a book of yellow paper, called the 1,000-character classic, and my grandfather would point at the Chinese letters of the sky, the clouds, and the water with his finger. I tried to read it, but after following along a couple of times, I would run away because it was boring. Anyway, thanks to my throwing a tantrum, I held my grandfather's hand tightly and holding the Andersen fairy tale book in my other hand. I went back to the wooden fence and on it were stacks of inkwells and yellow papers, and behind them were 6 small red and white flags, each pinned to the wall. I was sitting very quietly in a chair by the fireplace. An old man came in wearing a coat, a uniform similar to the winter coat worn by the Japanese military. Everyone called the coat a hangover. He bowed to his grandfather and greeted him. Then he looked at me and said, "You are my granddaughter." He then said, "Wow, your eyes are as big as bells. You take after your grandfather," and patted my head. The grandfather said, "Yes, she was complaining that she was going to see her mother, so I brought her here today. Besides, the little girl has a cold. That's why I brought her here for the picnic today. The little girl must be bored all day long. Why don't you take a train with me today?" the train conductor grandfather said to me. That day, I rode the train for the first time. There was no one on the train, and there were green chairs on both sides, but I couldn't see them all. More things to see. If you're hungry, tell me and I'll give you something delicious, okay? And what is your name? My name is Yonuo. Oh, yes, your name is pretty. Oh, Yin Wu sang. Train sound I heard at my grandfather's house. The train sound I heard from the train was really good. The scenery outside the train window slowly passed by. I wanted to wave to someone. People just looked out the window as if nothing had happened. 'Cause what I could see outside the window was a small river flowing and the train was passing over a railroad bridge. Are you scared, oh Yin Wu? I hesitated. I said to myself, no, you're not scared. The sound of the train I heard then was different. It was a wonderful sound that made my heart flutter. There was snow on the mountain. The train went on endlessly, passing mountains, fields, and mountains, going in and out of the tunnel. The distant horn occasionally blew, woo. There were people at the station, some of them carrying containers full of seafood, including pollock and squid. There was also seaweed pulled out of the seawater. An old woman who had boarded the train with a large cloth bag full of seaweed gave a few strands of seaweed to the train conductor. Because the train was getting warmer because there were so many people on board. The train left again with a hissing sound. My grandfather as if I had been away for a very long time. I heard the conductor grandfather telling my grandfather that I was riding the train very quietly. The conductor grandfather gave the seaweed to my grandpa. Thanks to my granddaughter, I will eat seaweed soup today. That evening, I ate the seaweed soup that smelled of sesame oil and made my mouth water. The cold horn has gone somewhere.